We are paid, that's all. We are God.
Yo guys! This is Uzumaki and this is part 11 of What If Naruto Was the Red Flash. Naruto finds out about Uzumaki clan when he was 4 years old. Naruto swears to rebuild the home of his clan and finds all the family he has left. Don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel and check the author in the description. Let's start. Chapter 63, End of Second Exam. Sasuke. The sun was shining on his face, and he squinted, moving his hand in front of his eyes, making everything appear blurry. Despite this, he could see several figures standing close to his position. Moving his hand away, his eyes finally adjusted to the light. The figures slowly shaped into the boy in white clothes. Sasuke remembered that he was on the same team as the green freak. Putting his hand on the grass, he attempted to stand up, when a headache hit him like a hammer, his head and skull ringing like a bell. Putting his hands on his head, he closed his eyes tightly. "Sasuke, you should rest," he heard the voice of a woman speak. And then he remembered. "Sakura," he said, almost shouting, forcing his eyes to open. He looked around and saw her leaning against the trunk of a tree. Her legs appeared to be getting better, but her skin around her knees was still swollen and red as blood. He looked away and Sasuke suddenly remembered the horrifying dream he had the night before, with his parents being devoured by maggots and worms and the IWA shinobi intervening. Sasuke clenched his teeth, ready to tear him apart with his hands. The sound of his name being called jolted him out of his reverie and forced him to turn around. His eyes were drawn to Neji, who was standing on the other side of the road near another tree, and the green freak, who was lying unconscious on the grass nearby, with a young woman standing close by, checking on his broken fingers. When did he broke his fingers? Sasuke shook his head. He couldn't recall anything like that happening during their battle against the Sound Shinobi. After closing his eyes and trying to remember, Sasuke realized that all that came to mind was his nightmare, Itachi coming after him, slicing through his chest like butter, his blood splattering all over the place like water. He couldn't remember anything else. Upon opening his eyes, he saw Ino, who had moved closer to him this time. She was kneeling in front of him, her eyes filled with concern, and Neji stood close by, standing and looking down on him. What? The time had come for Sasuke to speak, but he had to speak in hushed tones, almost a whisper. "I treated your wounds because you were in terrible shape," Ino explained, though Sasuke was perplexed as to what she was referring to as he was about to inquire. As Ino continued to explain with concern, "When I woke up, you were rolling around on the ground, throwing your arms everywhere, almost as if you were trying to hit an invisible enemy. Your whole skin was pale, almost like milk." Sasuke remained silent as he recalled everything that occurred in his dream, with the mirror serving as a reminder. "Can you tell me how Sakura is doing?" While standing on his legs with his legs slightly shaking, almost as if he were standing for the first time, Sasuke asked, casting another glance at his teammate before turning to look at Ino once more. With sadness, Ino explained that her legs had become infected and that she required immediate medical attention from an excellent hospital. "She is fine, but I don't think she will be able to do much for a while," Ino said. Sasuke simply nodded his head in acknowledgement of the information, his face not showing much emotion, and then he remembered. "Wait! What's the deal with Naruto? Have you seen him recently?" Sasuke inquired, turning to look at Ino once more, who was looking down to the side, a look of sadness on her face. "We haven't seen the Senju yet. It's possible that he couldn't handle this after all," Neji said instead of her, a smirk on his face as he answered the question. Then, with his fist clenched, Sasuke marched towards him, his eyes narrowing in his direction. The Hyuga's smirk faded slightly as he stared at him. "Listen to me, you don't know him, but I know Naruto, and he would never go down that easily," he said confidently as he stared at the Hyuga. As Neji was about to say something, a voice came from behind him and reached their ears. "Can you two please come to a halt? We don't have time for this, and you, Neji, Lee, who requires medical attention, must be transported to the tower," Tenten said as she rose to her feet and turned to face Sasuke. Sasuke was taken aback when she reached into her bag and hurled a scroll at him, which he grabbed and discovered to his surprise was the scroll they needed to pass the exam. "Tenten," Neji exclaimed, turning to face her in disbelief. She didn't even flinch at his tone. Instead, she took a step closer and placed her index finger on his chest. "Listen up, Neji, we have more than enough scrolls to get through this exam. In fact, we don't even need that particular scroll. If you could look after your fellow shinobi friend, it wouldn't hurt. Tenten took a step forward, her body leaning closer as if challenging him. Niji stood silent before sighing. You can have that scroll, but don't expect any more charity. Tenten walked past a tired sight before following Niji's footsteps. Can you tell me how you were able to make the IWA shinobi to leave? Sasuke inquired, curious as to whether or not they had the strength to accomplish what he was unable to. Niji came to a complete stop in his tracks before turning to look at Sasuke with bemusement. IWA shinobi? We didn't come across any IWA shinobi while we were here. He said this before sprinting away. Sasuke became even more perplexed, and he began to wonder what the whole thing was about. We have to get out of here, Sasuke said thoughtfully, expressing his dissatisfaction with the prospect of remaining in this forest any longer. When they finally arrived at the tower, Sasuke realized they had failed, but to his surprise, just as they were about to enter, he noticed the Taki team standing close to the gates, and with them was Naruto. Is Naruto-kun alright? Ino inquired immediately as she attempted to get closer. Sasuke recognized the girl as Ashera, and he didn't know the name of the third person but didn't care. Despite the fact that Naruto was lying unconscious against a tree, his face was slightly red around his eyes, his cheeks were a little hollow, and his breathing rate was extremely rapid. Can you tell me what happened to him? Ino screamed and pointed an accusing finger at the Taki team, who didn't appear to agree with her accusation in the least. Calm down, Ino, if they wanted to hurt Naruto, they would have done it by now. You're so troublesome, Shikamaru said, a bored expression on his face as he pointed out Ino's behavior. We're at a loss as to what's wrong. We wanted to bring him here, but we didn't know where you were, so we waited at the tower's entrance, hoping to see you there. We waited until you arrived. With his eyes closed, the third teammate stated his thoughts. Let's get him inside. We have the scrolls. Let's get him healed, Sasuke said as they made their way through the entrance to the tower. When they finally arrived at the tower, Sasuke was on the verge of passing out from exhaustion when Shikamaru caught him. I had no idea a simple walk in the forest could make you feel so ill, he remarked, a sly grin on his face. Sasuke only managed a shaky shrug. Shikamaru then appeared to pause for a moment before turning to face Ashera. Don't you think you could use Fuinjutsu to fix it? Let's take a walk inside first, Ashera said after a tired glance at him. They walked into the tower with Sasuke's arm wrapped around Shikamaru's shoulder as they did so. When they first walked in, they were greeted by a riddle. If you do not have access to heaven, educate yourself and prepare yourself. If you do not have possession of the earth, you can run through the fields and feel the power. If you open heaven and earth at the same time, dangerous paths will become safe. Something has a secret to it, and this is it. It will direct you on your journey. Ashera didn't even have to pause to consider her options. It's telling us to open the scrolls, she said. Sasuke and Shika exchanged nods. Both of them took their scrolls out of their pockets. Neither of them opened it quickly because they weren't sure whether it was a trap or not. Ashera recognized the seals on the scrolls right away and exclaimed, "It's a summoning seal, that's for sure. It should be thrown away." The two of them did as Asha instructed, tensing up in anticipation of any potential danger that might come their way. They were completely unprepared for Irika to appear out of nowhere, first with a smile and a wave, and then with horror on his face when he saw how badly they had been beaten, particularly Naruto. What happened to you three? Kami, what happened to you three? He was stuttering. Sasuke took the initiative and stepped forward. Irika-sensei, do you think it's possible for me to meet with Hokage-sama at some point today or tomorrow? I have some very bad news. Irika made a shaky motion with his head. Sasuke, the next phase of this exam will take place in 3 days. And during that time period, none of the genin are permitted to interact with their senseis, much less with the Hokage himself. Sasuke let out a sigh and motioned for Irika to approach. Once he was in the man's ear, he began to speak in hushed tones. I'm fairly certain that the news of Orochimaru being in the exams and ambushing us is quite significant. If it was possible, Irika's eyes widened even wider in horror. Orochimaru? He exclaimed, his face contorted with horror. His composure was restored and he stated, I'll make sure to report this to the Hokage, but you won't be able to meet with him right now. I've got more to tell you, Sasuke said, narrowing his eyes. Then please tell me. I'll pass it along to the Hokage. Sasuke sighed and rolled his eyes. Irika-sensei. Due to the fact that Orochimaru is an S-rank missing nin, any information pertaining to him is also S-rank. If the Hokage tells you, that's not a problem. But I'm only going to tell the Hokage. He even crossed his arms, indicating that he was not changing his mind about what he thought. He sighed, his face a look of resignation on his face. All right, I'll tell the Hokage that you've received news about Orochimaru. He quickly added after noticing Sasuke's expression of satisfaction, but it's up to him whether or not he wants to pay you a visit within the 3-day period. You should be aware that even the Hokage must adhere to the rules. Sasuke shrugged, satisfied with his accomplishment. There was no way Hokage-sama was going to pass up the opportunity to see him. Orochimaru was a former student of his who went on to become a very infamous missing nin. Without a doubt, he'd be curious as to why his student was loitering around Konoha during the Chunin examinations. "I'll take you 3 to your room right now," says the teacher. Iruka beckoned them to follow him and then began walking away from them. Soon after, someone arrived to look after Sakura and Naruto. Sasuke closed his eyes as the vision of his older brother appeared in front of him, like an angel of death, and he knew that one day, just like every other angel of death, he would come for him as well. Danzo. Danzo, it's far better to honor Konoha by living than it is to die, says the second. But what exactly did that mean, Danzo wondered. In battle, his ancestors had died, having given their lives for the greater good of Konoha. It was a ninja's responsibility to be willing to give their lives in order to save their village. There was no greater honor for a shinobi to achieve, which was why he was still so weak at the time. He was weak and pitiful because he was unable to take that step. He was too terrified to do his job, and as a result, he failed where Hiruzen had succeeded. That was why Hiruzen had been elevated to the position of Hokage, and it had been Danzo's sworn duty to fight and, if necessary, die for him. What a twist of fate. Hiruzen had a soft personality. He had too much heart for a shinobi, and he couldn't put his feelings aside even for the sake of a mission. He was vulnerable, and a shinobi should never be vulnerable in the first place. He was also a better shinobi than Danzo, as well as a more capable shinobi. What do you think I'm like now? It is preferable to honor Konoha by continuing to live. What exactly does this mean? Danzo-san, the Hokage would like to see you, the Anbu says. He kept his fists clenched and did not turn around. For what? He didn't say anything, Danzo-san. He finally deigned to look at the messenger after schooling his expression into one of calm disdain for the situation. That's perfect, then. I'm going to go see what he's calling me for now. It is preferable to honor Konoha by continuing to live. He couldn't get the thought to leave him alone. What did it have to do with anything? Ah, Danzo, says Hiruzen. Hiruzen still appeared to be uncomfortable in the formal robes of the Hokage. Danzo noticed that the hat was also a little too big for him, but he kept a smirk on his face. Instead, he bowed his head. Danzo asked, "Did you want to meet with me?" Hiruzen's nervous smile was something he didn't see very often, but the slightly sheepish expression on his face was something he was used to seeing from him. "Please don't refer to me as that. I'm starting to feel my age." Since the Nidame's passing had passed, it had been a month. In the month since Danzo had lost his teacher, and since his rival had been recognized as Hokage, the most powerful shinobi in the village, and the very symbol of Konoha, it has been a month since Danzo has lost his teacher. Danzo? But it was mostly out of displeasure with himself that he blinked and scowled. He was allowing his emotions to come to the surface once more. A shinobi's emotions should be tightly controlled at all times, and they should remain in command at all times. What? Hiruzen was a little taken aback by the slight snarl in his voice. "Listen, about all of this," says someone. He made a vague motion with his hand, but Danzo knew exactly what he was talking about. "I didn't ask for it, don't forget that." Danzo didn't say anything. "I just have a feeling." He came to a halt and tried again. "Since we returned, you've been a little withdrawn from us. Even though I am the Hokage, Danzo and I are still friends. I wanted to bring it to your attention again." Hiruzen came to a complete stop once more. "I wanted to express my regret as well." He blinked, surprised and unable to conceal his disappointment yet again. "For what are you apologizing?" "As a result of my behavior at the time." Despite a brief moment of hesitancy, he maintained his resolve and continued, "I didn't think about it at the time. Didn't take your feelings into consideration. Regarding your family, I wasn't trying to be lighthearted in order to diminish their sacrifice, and I was simply scared." Danzo made the suggestion. Hiruzen cracked a sly grin once more. "Yeah." They fell into a state of complete silence. "Do you have anything for me, Hokage-sama?" asked Danzo. He inquired in a neutral tone, as he didn't want to be here and couldn't bring himself to look at his former friend who was standing there. Sarutobi had dismissed him that day, and Danzo had initially remained in the shadows, curious as to what kind of Hokage his former friend would turn out to be. However, Danzo soon realized that his former friend would not make a good Hokage. He wished for peace, but Hiruzen couldn't grasp the concept that you can't make peace with people who crave war. With the passage of time, Danzo came to realize that feelings had no place in the shinobi world, They were merely a nuance. He stood there watching as his weapons knelt in front of him. Danzo had no confidence in anyone else in the world except his weapons. They would never betray him. They were only loyal to him, only to me, Danzo reasoned, a slight smirk on his face as he thought about it. When Danzo considered that they were weapons, and that no weapon betrays its master, he thought to himself before motioning for them to leave. Soon after, his most important follower appeared in front of him, and he was deafeningly quiet, making no sound at all, not even the sound of his breathing, his face fixed on the ground, kneeling before him. Is it done? It was the weapon who spoke, with his mask shaped like a ghost and no eye holes on it, who said, "Yes, Danzo-san. Good, get ready for the Uzumaki stage." Chapter 64, Preliminary. Sasuke. Opening his eyes, he heard someone banging on the door. Looking around, he saw he was still alone in the room. Getting in a sitting position on the couch, he grabbed his blue shirt from the head of the chair near the bed. Soon he wore his clothes before he stood up and walked over to the door. Opening it, he raised an eyebrow at the sudden and unusual early visit of his sensei. Can I walk in?" Kakashi-sensei asked with a carefree attitude. Sasuke spoke nothing but stepped aside to let him in. Kakashi stopped leaning against the door's framing. Walking inside, his visible eye checked the room. To his surprise, he saw a book about medicine lying on the chair near the bed, and he looked at the title. How to Heal a Wound. Kakashi read the title with a hushed tone before turning to look at Sasuke, who was leaning against the closed door, his arms crossed and waiting for him to explain. "I wanted to come and congratulate my team for passing the second exam, but looking at the condition of Sakura and Naruto," Kakashi started and noticed how Sasuke's ears perked up at the mention of his teammates, but yet he spoke nothing and gave him an uncaring look. "So what?" "I just hope they are awake for the third exam," Sasuke said, with an uncaring tone. Kakashi noted his eyes were looking anywhere but to him. Kakashi understood Sasuke thought that he would need his teammates well and able to function for the third exam. Thankfully that wasn't the case. "If it makes you feel any better, you don't need your teammate to start the third exam," Kakashi spoke, paying extra attention to his reaction. He expected perhaps a sigh of relief, but Sasuke looked tenser. "Sakura is better now, her legs are saved," Kakashi spoke and saw the way his neck immediately twitched towards him. Kakashi half wondered how his neck didn't snap, as his eyes were widened before turning back to normal. "Her legs are saved? What do you mean?" Sasuke with a calm tone. "Her legs were infected, the smell was terrible, but the staff here healed the infection before it could potentially force them to cut off her legs to save her," Kakashi said. Sasuke's eyes widened once again before he slightly lowered his head. "Shame, is he feeling shame?" Kakashi asked himself out loud. Silence took over them as Sasuke grabbed his right wrist with his left hand before looking up at Kakashi-sensei again. "What about Naruto?" Sasuke asked with a dreadful tone, and he knew the enemy he faced was a Sannin. Someone like him should never be underestimated. Kakashi sighed, not exactly knowing how to answer. "We don't know, at least the staff of medical shinobi don't know what to make of it. He is suffering a high fever, the doctors guess that must be poison, but checking his body, there was no trace of poison anywhere. So far he's not better," Kakashi spoke, holding back the terrifying thought of losing Naruto. "Tsunade arrived yesterday to check on him, but even she couldn't do anything. She said she healed his wounds, but the fever wasn't going away." When she forcefully opened his eyelid, his scara was red like blood. Tsunade had almost a heart attack. A red scara usually meant he had internal bleeding, usually from his brain, but doing a double check, there was no bleeding whatsoever. Right now, Tsunade said all they could do right now was hope he would survive. Kakashi saw that Sasuke looked messed up by the news. He might try to hide behind an indifferent mask, but knew he was worried for his teammates. "If you want, you can visit them if you want," Kakashi suggested, walking closer to him. Sasuke spoke nothing but followed him outside the room. Walking through a long corridor, the lights every 3 meters, Sasuke followed behind, not uttering a word. Soon they reached a door. Kakashi-sensei grabbed the door handle before he turned to look at Sasuke. The Uchiha spoke nothing as Kakashi opened the door. Walking inside, Sasuke was hit by the smell inside. Walking inside, he saw several beds inside, all of them occupied. He soon found Naruto sleeping on his bed. His face was slightly red. He saw Ashera was sleeping close to his bed, her head resting on his bed. His eyes found Sakura, who was unconscious and looked peacefully, in a deep slumber, her breathing normal, her face looked normal, her lips didn't look purple like in his dream, her pink had covered most of her pillow below her head, she looked alive, her legs weren't red anymore. Sasuke released a small sigh of relief at seeing them all right. He walked up to Sakura, putting his palm on her forehead. She wasn't burning hot anymore, moving his hand away. Kakashi brought a chair over to him, giving him a nice smile. You have gotten better, Sasuke, Kakashi suddenly spoke, breaking the silence between them. Sasuke raised an eyebrow in confusion. Better? I was barely hurt, he spoke since his headache and his ears pounding on his head were gone. He didn't feel pain anymore. Never mind, Kakashi spoke, instead completely ignoring his question, annoying Sasuke. I heard what happened in the forest. Both Iruka and Hokage-sama gave me a brief recap of what happened, Kakashi looking at Naruto behind Sasuke before his visible eye turned to look at Sasuke. But I want to hear it from you as well, Kakashi-sensei said, or maybe he ordered, the Uchiha wasn't sure. Sasuke started speaking, giving him a full report of what happened from the moment they entered the Forest of Death until they walked inside the tower. That was the end, Sasuke finished. He, of course, didn't give him a full detail of the dream he saw. He still could see the dead eye of his mother looking back at him. Kakashi was silent after hearing Sasuke's explanation, and he was both proud and angry with his little brother. Proud that he had made sure to protect his friend, that he hadn't just run away from danger. Naruto knew that Orochimaru was targeting only Sasuke. He could have just run away or acted as if he saw nothing amiss, but chose to stay and protect his friends and teammates, despite risking his own life. He stood his ground against the Sannin. That's a true shinobi, Kakashi thought, proud like never before. You would be so proud of him, Minato-sensei and Kushina-san, Kakashi thought with a smile. But seeing him in a condition like that made him angry that he had decided to keep fighting even after Sasuke had gotten away and were probably safe. Sighing, he knew it was pointless to dwell on things of the past, despite himself not doing an excellent job at it. Kakashi-sensei, he escaped his thoughts when he heard the voice of his student. Looking up again, he saw Sasuke looking at him with a curious look. Do you think Naruto will survive this? He asked, sounding strong and uncaring, making Kakashi wonder why his student was trying so hard to act as if he didn't care for the well-being of his teammates. Kakashi smiled, making it look like it wasn't that bad. Don't worry, Sasuke, Naruto is strong. He won't go down that easily, Kakashi spoke with confidence, but he wondered who he was trying to convince. Before Sasuke could ask something else, they heard whimpering. Looking down, he saw Sakura moving around, uncontrollably, murmuring words he couldn't hear. He saw as she opened her eyes slowly, only half open, looking up at him. A smile slowly spread on her face. How are you feeling, Sakura? Kakashi asked, seeing her student was waking up. Sakura turned her eyes at Kakashi in confusion. What happened? She asked, uncertain, not remembering much, and not knowing where she even was. Don't worry, Sakura, you're in the hospital. You're safe here, Kakashi spoke gently. As for what happened, well, you were attacked by Orochimaru, the Sannin. Kakashi explained what had happened based on what Sasuke had told him. In the end, Sakura stood silent, with only one thought in mind: I wasn't able to protect anyone. I failed Naruto, Sasuke and Kakashi-sensei, Sakura thought, trying hard to not cry in front of her team. Hey, Sakura, what's WR? I'm sorry. I failed. I just wasn't able to do anything helpful. Again. I'm nothing but a terrible kunoichi, Sakura spoke as tears rolled down her cheek, burying her face on her pillow. You're right, Sasuke spoke, grabbing her and Kakashi's attention. The sensei wanted to tell him to shut his mouth when the Uchiha raised his hand before looking at Sakura again. You failed us, but I failed the team as well. Where was I when Naruto needed our help? Hiding under a tree, not being able to help my teammate. But do you see me crying about it? Do you think the tears you're spilling will fix anything? Do you think anything you say will fix anything? No. Sadly no, tears won't bring you anywhere. The only thing you can do now is stand up. You failed us, you're at the bottom. The only thing left for you is to stand up and show everyone that you have changed, Sasuke with a sincere smile on his face. What if I fail again? Then you will fail again, and again, and again until you succeed. Sakura looked up at Sasuke in a new light, while Kakashi stood stunned at what Sasuke said. He couldn't help but smile at his students. Sasuke had really gone a long way, from the emo who didn't care about anyone to someone who wanted to protect his friends. Sakura just nodded, not saying anything as she smiled at him, and for the first time, she was smiling in a new way. Their moment was broken when they heard movements. Looking up from Sakura, Kakashi's eye widened at seeing Naruto moving around his bed. Naruto, Kakashi shouted, standing up and moving towards him. Reaching him, he saw Naruto's eyes were still closed, but he kept moving his chest up and down, his hands touching his forehead. This caused Ashera to wake up and see Naruto moving his body around. She started shaking him to wake up, shouting his name in concern. Naruto, Kakashi shouted again before turning his head behind at Sasuke. Find Tsunade or anyone, he shouted. Sasuke left immediately. Even Sakura tried to stand up to try and perhaps help him, but one slight move of her legs caused her to cry out in pain. Naruto suddenly opened his eyes. Kakashi gasped at seeing his eyes were bright red, almost like a red fire burning inside his eyes. But not like Kyuubi's eyes. Before Kakashi could ask if he was alright, a scream of agony echoed throughout the whole room and beyond. Naruto kept screaming as a red circle slowly appeared in the center of his forehead. The ring was small, but the edges looked like it was made of fire, and inside the ring was the word. As soon as the word appeared, Naruto suddenly stopped screaming, he stopped moving, and for a moment, Kakashi feared the worst, but Naruto opened his eyes much to his relief, and they were back to normal blue. "Naruto, how are you feeling?" Ashera asked, immediately checking on his pulse around his wrist, but to her surprise, it was normal, his heartbeat wasn't fast. Naruto smiled at her question, but his eyes kept looking up at the ceiling. "I have never felt as good as now," Naruto spoke as he stood in a sitting position on his bed. "I did it." 3 days later. After giving his speech on the reason why the Chunin exam existed other than to promote Genin to Chunin, the Hokage stared at the many different Genin that were before him and could not help but be impressed at how many made it this far, especially at the fact all the rookie Genin from Konoha made it. It's impressive that so many made it this far, and many of them are recently made Genin. This generation certainly has a lot of promise, thought the Sandaime, before his eyes fixed on Naruto where a look of relief and concern spread across his face. After being informed that Team 7 had reached the gates, Hiruzen had been relieved, but then his condition was worrying, the fever wasn't disappearing. But even with Naruto in front of him alive and seemingly well, new concerns started to appear in Sandaime's mind. The seal on his forehead hadn't disappeared, despite Naruto reassuring them that he felt good. As Sandaime continued to stare at Naruto, he planned to talk with Naruto about what happened later. Even though his ANBU didn't find Naruto, they had found the area where Naruto appeared to have fought Orochimaru, and given what the ANBU described to him, Sarutobi knew Naruto had given it his all and put up a fight. The Hokage was, of course, not the only one who was surprised that so many Genin had made it this far, since the second head examiner Anko was equally surprised. There were 80 Genin who entered the forest, and 48 were able to pass it. Sure, I said that I would make more than half of them fail. But still, I never expected more than 10 to make it to this point, thought Anko in surprise. Since out of them, all the teams entered the forest, Kiri, Suna, Taki, Oto, and Kumo each had one team who passed, while the remaining 5 came from Konoha. Eventually, Anko's eyes fell on Naruto and Sasuke, where she narrowed her eyes at his seal on the forehead. As expected, you came out of the forest unharmed, Gaara, thought the Suna Jonin sensei Baki. I'm impressed that your team has made it this far, Kakashi. But as long as my team is here, I fear they'll go no further. Since the next exam stage, personal skills and abilities are critical. For youth is sweet and sour, and sometimes strict, spoke Guy, as he turned to Kakashi as he stood behind the Hokage with the other Jonin senseis, whose teams passed. Kakashi, of course, just ignored Guy's little speech, where once he finished, he turned to Guy and said, "Did you say something, Guy?" Naturally, of course, the self-proclaimed Konoha no Kedakaki Aoi Moju, Konoha's sublime green beast of prey, did not take this well and started to cry out in disbelief. After which, he began to curse Kakashi's cool hip attitude and said he wouldn't lose to him next time. Tsunade, of course, shook her head at Guy's antics since she always wondered if he was normal. "Trust me, Guy, when I say this, your team is the least of Naruto's concerns," said Tsunade, with a slight frown, as she looked at her godson and saw him place his hand on his forehead. The Hokage had informed her and Jiraiya that Orochimaru had attacked Team 7. Besides, if I were you, I would have been more worried about your team, because if you knew what Naruto could do, you'd know that your team stands no chance against him. At this remark, Guy frowned slightly and wondered what Naruto could do, to have Tsunade have such faith in his abilities. However, Guy had spent a bit of time with the youthful kid. As the Jonin sensei looked over the remaining Genin, the Genin themselves analyzed their situation and looked around those who passed with them. The Oto team, of course, glared angrily at Sasuke, remembering they had failed their mission, where Zaku swore revenge on Sasuke for humiliating him. However, Dosen narrowed his eye at Naruto since he still didn't know what to make of the redhead boy. So out of the 32 teams who entered the second exam, only 16 made it here, thought Temari, before she lost her train of thought when she saw her younger brother looking to their left. When she looked, she saw that her brother was staring at Uzumaki, Naruto and the guy from IWA, and had a bloodthirsty look on his face, as if he was glad that they had passed the second test. "This isn't good," thought the blonde girl, as she feared that her brother would lose control of himself again, should he ever have to fight either boys, since she knew that bloodthirsty look all too well. So Naruto-kun passed as well, I'm glad, thought Hinata when she turned to look at Naruto. Just as I thought, all the ones who stood out made it, Niji thought, before he glanced to Naruto and Sasuke, who stood next to him and narrowed his eyes slightly. Where he remembered that Naruto had apparently fought against a Sannin, not mentioning the seal on his forehead was unsettling. Looks like Naruto made it, commented Omoi, in a low voice to his teammates when he glanced at Naruto on his right. As expected, stated Yujito with a slight smirk. Indeed, but there's something here, a Miss Kitten, Nibi warned her with a serious tone, something that caught Yujito by surprise. What is it? Yujito asked, concerned. I'm not sure yet, but the way your boyfriend feels is quite different. Before entering the second exam, I could feel him and Kurama inside him, but now I feel something new, but I'm not sure where have I felt this before, Nibi spoke. Yujito listened to her and wondered what she meant, completely missing what she said about Naruto being her boyfriend. Sasuke looked at each team, one by one, he saw the ones that interested him, but the one who interested him the most was standing at the other side. The Uchiha gritted his teeth at the IWA shinobi, the damn dream was still fresh on his mind, sometimes just closing his eyes, and Sasuke felt like he was back in that nightmare. It seemed the IWA shinobi had felt the glare. Turning his head around, he made eye contact with Sasuke, who narrowed his eyes at him, but the Uchiha suddenly felt a chill spread throughout his body, his throat as dry as a desert. He noticed the IWA shinobi smirking before turning to look forward again. Jitego looked at the Team 7 of Konoha, especially Naruto, who seemed not to notice or care to acknowledge his glare. Jitego didn't know why, but the Uzumaki seemed different. He wasn't a censor, but he could feel something new around him. He wondered what it was. Shikamaru glanced at the IWA shinobi. He couldn't help but think something was amiss here when he arrived in front of them at the Forest of Death. Shika remembered his eyes going dark, and that was it. Shikamaru couldn't remember anything else. The next thing he remembered was waking up and seeing Ino asleep and Niji shouting at Lee to wake up. Shika had asked Ino, but she was in the same situation as him, but when he had asked Sasuke, the face of the Uchiha had turned pale, almost like snow, and for a moment, Shika had thought that he might lose consciousness, but his skin color turned slightly normal soon and just walked past him without saying anything. What is your secret? Ashera glanced from the corner of her eyes at Naruto, who seemed to be in a world of his own. She saw the red circle around his forehead, reminding her of her own red circle. Still, unlike him, her seal had disappeared 1 year ago without any explanation. She wondered what it was that she was feeling around him. I take it from here, a voice suddenly said. The Jonins left the area along with the Hokage. In front of the Genins was a shinobi with a sword tightened behind his back. He coughed before speaking. Now, before you reach the final exam, we will have a preliminary round, he spoke. This caused an uproar amongst some of the Genins who were still tired by the second exam. This is the rule, coughing. We hadn't predicted that so many teams would pass the second exam. Therefore, we have prepared this preliminary round before we move into the final exam, he spoke, coughing again. Now, does anyone wants to quit, just raise your hand. All of the gathered ninjas stared at Kabuto, largely in dismay, as he raised his gloved hand in the surrender of a competition he apparently had no energy left to be a part of. He had made it to the competitive stage of the Chunin exams, and after everything he had been through in the Forest of Death, his sudden withdrawal shook up his comrades. Naruto narrowed his eyes at the liar, and if he ever met him outside Konoha, in a mission, he would make sure to kill him. The exam proctor, Heiate Gecko, glanced through his dossier of the genin participating in the Chunin exams. You're Kabuto, right? Heiate coughed. You may leave now. Does anyone else want to retire? Oh, I forgot to tell you that from here on, it will be individual battling. You may raise your hand based on your own judgment. Before anyone had a chance to answer, Heiate coughed, drawing everyone's attention back on him. Now, there's no one else retiring, right? Sakura started to raise her hand, but Sasuke gripped it menacingly. Don't you dare say a word, he muttered, his eyes boring into hers with an intensity she had never seen. Defeated, she lowered her hand, and Heiate surveyed the group nonchalantly. Now, let's begin the preliminary. The preliminary will consist of one-on-one fighting. You are to fight as if it is a real-life confrontation. The winners will advance to the third test. Heiate paused for a momentary coughing spasm, and the group watched with apprehension as he continued as though nothing had happened. There are basically no rules. The fight continues until one of you dies or is knocked out or admits defeat. If you don't want to die, then quickly acknowledge your defeat. But, when I decide that the winner has been clearly established, since we don't want to increase the amount of corpses pointlessly, I'll jump in and stop things. And the object that controls your destiny is... The genin snapped to attention as a low humming filled the room. The back wall began to shift as a large screen was unveiled. Is this, Hayate finished? This electronic scoreboard will show the matchups for each fight. Now, this is sudden, but let's announce the two names of the first fight. Everyone faced the screen nervously in anticipation. The first name appeared. Misumi Tsurugi. That is one of Kabuto's teammates, Sakura whispered to Naruto. The two turned and faced Misumi. He was slightly taller than Kabuto, wearing thin-rimmed glasses and a black mask that concealed his face from the nose down. Although he was a leaf ninja, there was something off about him. Lulja Lataka. Naruto heard Ikano whisper to his teammate. The girl in question rolled her eyes before she turned to stare at her opponent. Ready to fight, blind-eyed, she spoke, seeing his what seemed like thick dark eyeglasses covering his eyes. As the others left the arena, Naruto focused on the girl. Do you think she will win? Naruto heard Sakura asking at his right. Naruto spoke nothing as Hayate shouted they could fight. The man prepared to attack, but before he could move, Lulja moved her leg slightly, causing a column of earth to rise from the ground out of nowhere and hit her enemy square in the chest, sending him crashing against the wall, taking everyone by surprise except the IWA team. How did the ground taste? Chapter 65, Aburame Clan. Everyone stood still. The ninja of Kabuto's team was lying on the ground, his back leaning against the wall, his chest looked to have shattered like glass. Lulja just looked bored. Was it over already, her green eyes almost shutting, as if she just wanted to fall asleep? If it was, this was much shorter than she thought. No wonder the older man said the Sound Village was not to be trusted when it came to strength. How did she do that? Sakura asked, leaning against the bars, trying to look closer. Her earth affinity is very high, and the chakra around her feet and ground is strange, Naruto pointed out. He could feel most of her chakra was focused on her feet, but could see her chakra had spread all over the ground around them. He wondered if that allowed her to move the ground around her without hand signs. Hey, Red Star, don't ruin the surprise now, Lulja suddenly shouted, turning to look at Naruto with a strange grin. The way you control your chakra and the ground. That's quite impressive, Naruto commented, slightly understanding how she had made the ground move without doing a hand sign. Oh my, such a compliment. Please keep going. I love compliments, she spoke with a proud grin before sending a wink at Naruto, who turned his face around. Ashera smirked at the teasing while Fu raised an eyebrow at the horrible flirting coming from the Earth Girl. Hearing groaning, everyone turned to see the shinobi standing up, his elbows against the wall, trying to stand up. Blood leaked out from his jaw, his teeth broken, as blood dripped on the ground, his breath heavy, almost trying to fill his lungs with air. You can give up if you want. There's no shame in that, Lulja spoke, her hands held together behind her head, looking at her enemy with a dull look. The shinobi spoke nothing. He prepared and rushed towards her to her right, his speed easily medium chunin, his hands raised as his hand hit her square in the cheek. The sound of crushing bones was heard as the shinobi screamed in pain. Naruto noticed the skin around her cheek had turned gray, almost the color of dirt. What happened now? Sakura asked aloud. Naruto noticed the wince from Lulja when she yelled. She has completed her earth manipulation affinity. The final step is to be able to turn your own skin as strong as a rock, to avoid damage or to add further damage at your fists or kicks, Naruto explained, clearly impressed. Everyone listened with attention, even Gaara was interested. Bravo, at least finally someone who understands the importance of earth affinity, Lulja spoke from the area, looking up at Naruto. Lulja looked down on her enemy, who was still holding his broken hand. The skin had turned red. This is boring, she pouted before slamming her foot on the ground, causing a column of the earth to raise and hit his chest from underneath. The shinobi flew high before hitting the ground. Lulja rolled her eyes as she made her way to her teammates. Hayate announced she was the winner. She glanced at Naruto before winking at him. Again, Naruto really felt nervous about how the Earth Girl was acting towards him. With the medic ninja and the last two competitors off the playing field and out of the way, Hayate walked forward and sighed. Okay then. Let's move right on to the second match. The proctor announced as all who remained watched the board for the next match. Many with grim expressions. The screen flashed once again as characters flew by on the screen. The letters settling until it revealed the names or the next competitors. Shino Aburame vs Zaku Abumi. Fu recognized the first name, but didn't know the second. Glancing over at the Mummy Sound team and Kabuto's last teammate, she guessed it was one of them. She was proven right when the male, the one besides the mummy ninja, spoke. Zaku chuckled a bit as he read the sign before looking across the room where he guessed his opponent was. "Which sucker is that?" he asked, overconfident from the get-go despite his injured arm. Across the room, Shino was silent as he watched his opponent. Observing the pathetic bug before him and how best to trap it, Hayate started coughing yet again, and Fu couldn't help but feel like he should go and get that cough checked. "Step forward, please." Hayate called out for the two candidates. Getting a better look at the sound ninja, Fu noticed Zaku had spiky, black hair and dark eyes. He wore a beige shirt with 2 black stripes and 3 prints of the kanji for death down the front. His forehead protector had an attached hapuri under the cloth rather than connected to the metal plate. As with his teammates, the mummy ninja and the girl, he wore a scarf around his neck. Were both arms in it earlier? She wondered. Very good. Now if you're both ready, then we'll begin. Hayate told them as they stood facing each other in front of him. Up on her side of the balconies, Sakura wore a worried expression on her face as she recognized the ninja. That's that Sound Village shinobi, the one who had his arm broken by Lee. She thought, remembering what Kakashi-sensei told her. How's he going to fight with those arms? She wondered, do you think Shino will be alright? Hinata asked, her mood gloomy. He's okay. Don't you worry about him. Kiba assured her. Ha! Hinata asked as she turned to the dog lover. He's the last person here I'd ever want to take on. Kiba answered, his tone serious and lacking his usual confidence. On her side of the room, Fu couldn't help but wonder how Shino was going to fight. She was kinda rooting for him. She was of the opinion, the less sound shinobi, the better. Candidates ready? Hayate asked as he backed away so he wouldn't get caught up in the fight. Seeing no arguments rising, Hayate didn't waste a moment. Begin. Well, Zaku. How you pull this one off will be a sight to see. The mummy sound ninja thought as he turned to his sensei. After nodding to, the sensei disappeared in a puff of smoke. The mummy couldn't help but feel a little unnerved with his sensei gone. Didn't he want to see his students pass? Didn't he care? Why leave when the match had only begun? Over with the Kyomo ninja, Karui spoke with a wicked grin. This is going to be fun. Both of her teammates turning to her. What do you mean? Yujito asked. Omoi showing a confused face as well. Karui raised an eyebrow at them. Didn't you read the last name? Don't tell me you forgot. That leaf shinobi down there is an Aburame. One of the 4 noble clans in Konohagakure. It's a well-known fact that at their birth, members of his clan are offered to a special breed of insects as a nest, residing just under their host's skin. These insects will then live in symbiosis with their host from that point on. Because of this, its members are characterized by their use of insects as weapons. I don't know anything more than that, so I honestly don't know how he will fight with them, but my money is on that sound ninja being in a world of hurt when this is all over. She told them with a sadistic grin and chuckle. Armed with this new knowledge, Omio had greater confidence in Shino winning the match. On the other hand, he wondered how hard it would be if he had to face him in the final round. He thought Yujito would be okay fighting him, since most insects didn't do too well in the fire. As for himself, he wasn't sure how well he or Karui would fare against him. Down in the field below, neither combatant had moved even though the proctor had given them the all-clear to start the match. Each were waiting for the other to execute their first attack. Waiting to see who was more patient. If you fight me, you won't be able to recover. Shino promised darkly. Forfeit and withdraw. Zaku stared at him with a frown before answering. Well, what do you know, I've got a little movement in one of them. His right arm moving slightly in the sling. Shino said nothing as Zaku got his arm out and crouched down into fighting stance, his single arm out before him as he got ready to charge at him. One good arm is more than enough to beat you, Zaku said as he rushed forward. Shino was standing perfectly still as his opponent came at him, only moving to raise his left arm to block Zaku's attack. Zaku's palm wide open. As Fu watched, she wondered if whatever happened to him caused him to be unable to close his hand properly as well. Why wasn't he punching Shino? What was the boy going to do, slap Shino out of the competition? You couldn't beat me using both your arms. Shino stated, not in overconfidence. He spoke as if his was fact, the simple truth. To Shino, it probably was the true. Yeah, well, I've got news for ya. Zaku shouted as air was pulled into a tiny hole in the center of his open palm the other ninja couldn't see. Try this. Blasting sound wave. He shouted as Shino turned his head towards the sound of rushing air, soon followed by an explosion occurred where the two ninja had stood. The sound startling Sakura as she tried to figure out what the sound shinobi had done to cause it. Dust rising as Shino was rolling away across the floor. Zaku smirked as the dust cleared enough to see his plan had worked and Shino was on the ground. Kiba and Hinata gasped at the sight of their teammate taking full force of the blast. Kiba's eyes twitching in shock. Hinata, being the sweet soul she was, couldn't help but be worried. Naruto looked shocked and angered. Sakura worried as well as she stood beside him. Whoa! What is the world was that? Did he have a small explosive hidden in his bandages or something? Karui asked in shock. Trying to figure out what happened, asking the others out loud to see if they knew. No. At least, don't think it was an explosive. Didn't you see? The blast only went towards Aburame. It was too controlled to have been an explosive. So it couldn't have been that. His hand was wide open and didn't move, so he didn't reach for an explosive with it. Even if he did have one stashed away, his other arm didn't move either. If there was an explosive hidden in the bandages, he couldn't have reached for it if it was there and activated it. I doubt it was an explosive spell tag. Furthermore, he would have get caught up in the blast radius of his own attack and injured himself further than he already is. So he didn't have an explosive hidden anywhere in there. Jitego concluded. I don't smell smoke or burning flesh either. Fu spoke, eyebrows furrowed as she too wondered what happened. If it wasn't an explosive spell tag or anything like that, then what was it? Omoy asked. Something went boom down there. It had to be something. Jitego didn't answer him as the dust was still trying to settle. The spectators watched as Shino's body appeared to be smoking from the blast and Shino remained motionless. They couldn't hear any groans or struggle from the sunglass-wearing ninja below. Hinata wondered if the blast rendered him unconscious. Hinata glanced at Zaku's teammates, to see the mummy ninja smirking underneath the bandages. Part of her wanted to throttle the ninja and demand answers as to what happened. Seeing him so pleased about it. It was then she noticed, the other sound sensei was gone, causing her to raise an eyebrow at the peculiar sight. Why would the sound shinobi leave? His student was fighting and this was the first time the sound had sent ninja from their village to fight in the exam. Why miss out on such two important occasions? Down below, Zaku clenched his hand into a fist and called out to Shino smugly. All right, fool. You had enough. Ashera sighed at the ninja. If this was a competition on how overconfident, smug, and plain annoying a ninja could be, this guy had already won then. To everyone's surprise, Shino appeared to have gotten up and was standing up after taking the full blast of the attack, albeit he was hunched over with his head down. Ha! Zaku asked. Confused as Shino began straightening up as the dust began to settle and fade. There's no way. Zaku claimed shocked as everyone else as they leaned in to get a closer look to see what happened. Shino appeared to be alright despite being a little roughed up and dirty from the blast knocking him off his feet and making him roll in the dirt. Yet, while Hinata was relieved to see him okay, they all began to hear something. It was the sound of chittering, like hundreds of bugs gathered together, growing louder and louder throughout the room. The sound freaking out the sound ninja. Hey! What? He asked as he looked around, trying to find the source. Even the spectators could hear it as they too looked around for the source. Ah! Sakura asked. Ha! Shikamaru nearly echoed. Ah! The girl sound ninja standing beside the mummy ninja asked as she checked the ceiling. Even the mummy ninja was confused. Ha! Naruto turned to the sound ninja. All will become clear soon enough. Though, I doubt that will help your friend. He should have listened to his opponent earlier. He said with a chuckle. What do you mean by that? The female beside the mummy ninja asked. You will see soon enough. Overconfidence has been the downfall of many, it will probably be your friends as well. You three should have studied the clans of the village better. Then you might have an idea as to the fate that Aburame has in store for him. Naruto answered as they all turned to the match. The mummy ninja worried now, but shook it off, having confidence no matter what special clan Zaka's opponent was from, Zaka would win. His team was chosen for a reason, they would make it. He thought even as the seeds of doubt grew inside of him no matter how hard he tried otherwise not to. Down below, Zaka soon found the source of the tiny chittering noise and gasped at the freaky sight before him. Across from the sound ninja, the chittering came from Shino, or what was inside him. Crawling around on his face, little black beetles were crawling over bits of his face and his clothes. Some climbing up and over the lower part of Shino's jacket and onto his front. All originating from little holes just off to the left of his glasses on his left side. The sight freaking out Zaku as his thoughts were racing through his head. What the, he's got bugs coming out of him, like a human hive. Sweating as the freaky sight. This guy's a freak show. He thought angrily as he moved into another fighting stance. That's cool and only slightly disturbing. It's one thing to hear about it, but completely another to actually see it in action. At least they're not slimy. Anything but slimy. Shikamaru thought with a slight shiver, recalling the bugs from the forest before thinking of something a little more pleasant. Did he use those in the first exam to cheat? They're perfect for spying as long as they don't get caught in a web, squished by accident or intentional, or someone uses bug spray on them. Are there other holes the bugs could escape from, or is it just his face? Can he feel them crawling around, or is he used to it since he's had them since he was a baby? Fu thought, curious about the peculiar sight before her and the rest of the spectators. It was intriguing to think about the peculiars of his clan's techniques. Why are they coming out now, though? How does Shino plan to use them against Zaku? There must be other purposes for his beetles besides spying. Sakura wondered about the glasses-wearing ninja. Briefly, Yujito wondered which group she disliked more, Kabuto's team, or the sound team. Pushing such thoughts aside, she could decide which team she disliked more and who she loathed to be in the same room with later. Yujito pulled her attention away from her inner musing and focused on more important matters before her. For example, like the match that was truly getting interesting now, Shino was preparing to use the techniques of his clan. Great! Zaku exaggerated sarcastically. Now that you've creeped us all out, what happens next? Shino said nothing as Zaku continued to glare at him. Above the two ninja, the other teams and there could see what Zaku could not. Ikano smirked at the Aburame. Quite clever, little leaf ninja. He thought, praising the leaf shinobi. Using the dust cloud to act and provide as a cover for your little friends to fly off and come around the sound idiot from behind while the focus was all on you. That's why the sound seemed to be coming from everywhere. They're so small, it's easy to miss them until they swarm you. By then, it's too late. He huffed. If this was real war, then you should have gone in for the kill, little leaf boy. These ninja here are too soft. Just like those fools of the village hidden in the sand. Just like I. Jitego thought as he recalled the many times his Raikage had not agreed with him about something, giving stupid excuses. Soon, Zaku could sense something was wrong, that there was something behind him. Ah! Touring around, Zaku saw a swarm of the little beetles closing in up behind him, the bugs covering the floor as they scuttled around. Nearly covering every inch of the ground. Upon seeing the tiny forces massed together behind him, Zaku was shaking in fear. The insects chittering away as they came closer to their prey as Zaku's face and body twitched, unsure what to do as fear override his mind, temporarily paralyzed as sweat trailed down his face and he desperately tried to move. In front of Zaku, Shino began to explain what exactly the bugs were. His mouth no longer hidden by his coat. His left hand in the air before him with a single beetle on his finder nail, the insect not even large enough to cover the entire nail. There are rare species of parasitic beetle that attack their prey in a swarm, eating its chakra. The beetles closing in. An army of this size will suck you dry in less than a minute. Zaku watching them before turning to Shino with hate and gritting his teeth. Your only intelligent option is to forfeit the match. You can't fight two opponents at once. If you use your good arm against me, my friends will swarm you from behind. Conversely, if you use your good arm to keep them at bay, then you'll have me on your blind side. Shino pointed out. Everyone could see, as that situation was, there was no way out for Zaku to fight back or escape without it failing in the long run. Shino already explaining what would happen if he attacked. Even if he tried to go up and jump away to a farther and maybe safer location, the beetles would only fly after him and get him that way. Shino could also attack him and that be the end of that. Either way, your defeat will be certain and unpleasant. It's wise to always have an ace in the hole. Shino told Zaku as his hands formed the hand signs for tiger, the bugs continuing their chittering, reminding Zaku time was running out and he needed to think of something quick. Otherwise, he was going to be bug food. Shaking, Zaku's eyes glazed over, which Naruto noticed. He couldn't help but wonder what the sound shinobi was thinking. In the depths of his mind, Zaku thought about the past, how he got up to this point of time. How he crawled out of the hole that was his past. The fear, the pain, the humiliation, the helplessness he had gone through. Thanks to that man, he now was on a greater path. He no longer had a reason to be afraid, and this freak show before him was making him feel these things. Zaku would make him pay. He was strong. He would show them. All of them. Snapping out of it and glancing back at ever-chittering bugs behind him, Zaku tried to think of something. Watching him closely, Shikamaru noticed something going on with Zaku. The glazed look was coming and going, but he seemed to be slightly out of it. His eyes going back and forth between the two forces attempting to crush him and memories that plagued him. Zaku's working hands shaking as he clenched it along with the rest of his body. That's it. Never again. Zaku swore, recalling the time in the forest, the green freak had injured his arm. That's it. That's never gonna happen again. Naruto watched as Zaku's fearful face transformed into a wild and crazed look of rage, slightly startling her. Wondering what made him snap. With a ferocious angry roar, Zaku thrust his fist out towards Shino, slightly startling the bug user. Opening his palm, the crazed look got wilder. Now you've done it. Now you've made me mad. He roared. The spectators watched as Zaku revealed his other arm, able to remove it too from the sling. The arm now facing the bugs. Though Shino's expression was hidden, one could tell he was curious about the fool's next move as he lowered his hand. Thinking it was a bluff and the fool had lost his senses, Zaku was frowning for but a moment until he broke into a wide grin. Ha! HNNH. He grunted as his arm strained and eventually moved his fist open on the second try. Startling Shino. Like you said yourself, always have an ace in the hole. Right? He asked crazed, the triplets yawning at the display. Has he lost it? What is an open palm going to do again, an army of those chakra-eating bugs? Choji asked as he scratched the back of his head. It's not just an open palm. Naruto observed, making his teammates look at him for answers. If you look closely, you'll see a tiny shine of metal. The guy has some type of holes in his palms. That has to be what created the explosion from earlier. You mean the explosive travels through the inside of his arm and out the hole? Ino asked. Naruto shook his head. No. I don't think so. I still don't think it was an explosive. I can't tell you how it works, but it's definitely not an explosive. Fu thought for a moment before she recalled something. He called it blasting sound wave. That explosion must have been sound. She explained, but sound has to be created by something, right? He didn't use any hand signs. Naruto pointed out, sound is caused by the simple but rapid mechanical vibrations of various elastic bodies. These, when moved or struck so as to vibrate, communicate the same kind of vibrations to the auditory nerve of the ear, and are then appreciated by the mind. The sound came out of those holes. It might be like a wind instrument. He sucks up air into it and forces it back out in a rush, creating the attack we saw earlier. Kakashi told them, the group nodding at his explanation. Ha! Shino asked, shocked at either his opponent was able to use his other arm or Zaku was able to use his own words against him. What the? Kiba asked outraged. I thought his right arm was shot. Down below, Zaku was shaking in fury as he roared yet again. I'll blow you away. He bellowed, preparing to blast the beetles and Shino into oblivion. As Fu watched, she couldn't believe her eyes. Leaning over the rail, she noticed Zaku's arms getting bigger and bigger by the second, growing more swollen, bulging in ways that shouldn't be happening. Something was wrong, but Fu didn't know what. She didn't recall his other arm swelling as much when he first used his attack. Was it doing so because he wanted a bigger explosion? He's done for, Naruto spoke, before anyone could ask what he meant. Everyone watched and listened as the sound of air escaping filled the room, replacing the sound of Zaku's previous roars. It was similar to the sounds of balloons expanding so much they tore holes in themselves and the air gradually escaping the flimsy confides that held it. Zaka's team jaw dropped as they witnessed something they thought they would never see, having never even thought it was possible, never conceiving the thought. Zaka's eyes widening as he too listened. Staring straight ahead, not a whimper or a scream escaped his lips. So shocked, he couldn't even feel the pain. He was in utter disbelief. He couldn't bring himself to look at his arms as blue chakra escaped along with tiny bits of his own flesh and the wind he had been storing in his arms. Sakura couldn't see it clearly, but it looked like it was somewhere around his elbow. Flecks of blue and flecks of skin appearing before Zaka's eyes. Small utters of shock were emitted from his mouth, but couldn't be heard over the sound of his arms bursting from the pressure of wind and chakra. The mummy ninja and the girl beside him gasping in horror. Kiba nearly jumped over the railing in shock as he leaned closer. Akamaru was nowhere to be seen. Kiba-sensei, Kurenai, watched speechless as the rest of them. Amazed with what her student did to his opponent. Ayaha! Zaka cried out in pain once the chakra and air had died down. Fu saw she was correct about the location, the bandages and start of his sleeves shredded where the blast had been strongest and most concentrated. Zaka lowered his arms as they hung limply in front of him. My arms! What's wrong with them? He shouted. Groaning and grunting in pain, Zaka huffed and puffed as he tried to catch his breath, gritting his teeth as he turned his palms up towards the ceiling to look at the holes. Ah! What? He cried as upon closer inspection of his hands, he saw a small swarm of black beetles gathered together and had crawled inside of the holes. So tightly packed together that air couldn't pass through the hole. How at the world, Karui trailed off. Wondering how and when Shino had got them there. The Aburame clan can control those bugs, remember? It was while Zaka was stressing out about what to do, the Aburame must have ordered the bugs to block them then or some time after that. Jitego figured. You got to give it to him, he's a good strategist. He's able to use his surroundings well and is able to distract his enemies easily for his bugs to move into position. Inako also decided to add his 2 bits into the conversation. Zaka was so absorbed in his anger, inner turmoil, and possibly his memories that he didn't even feel the beetles crawling around on his palms. Besides that they're so small, they're easy to miss. In a moment on the ground floor, where the 2 ninja were fighting, Shino swiftly appeared behind Zaku as he began to explain his own plan. Which dealt far greater success than Zaka's plan of trying to trick him into thinking his other arm was too injured to fight with and lead him into a false sense of security. Earlier, while I was distracting you with my helpful advice, I was also sending some of my little friends to plug up those bothersome wind holes in your hands. He said, highly pleased with himself, and from his tone, Shino was slightly smug about it working and fooling Zaku so easily. Jitego could hear the pride in his voice when he spoke of his bugs. Jitego thought the boy was smiling but couldn't tell and be absolutely sure from the way his coat covered the bottom portion of his mouth. Both hands, just to be sure. Shino continued. You see, while an ace in the hole is good. Zaka gasping in shock as Shino hissed out the rest of his sentence. 2 aces are better. Shino joked. Omoi snorting at the joke. The humor and irony of the situation not lost on him. The aces being the bugs and the holes literally being holes inside Zaka's arms. I like this guy. Omoi concluded. You got to give it to him, he has a great sense of humor. Morbid, but amusing nonetheless. He ended with a chuckle. Karui just groaned and rubbed her temples. First you liked the second proctor and now you've found someone to joke around with. Just great. She said sarcastically. Yujito already made friends with that Uzumaki boy and the bug girl. What's next? Me finding a boyfriend? Once again, Zaka began to feel trapped and helpless as beads of sweat clanged to his face as he filled once again in rage as it consumed his body and rational mind, roaring as he attempted to swing his arms out and hit Shino. Only for Shino to see it coming and smack Zaku away as the sound ninja cried out and landed in a heap on the floor, groaning as he fell and didn't get up. Lulja leaned on the bars and leaned her hand onto her cheek as the other hand dangled over the edge. She couldn't help but think how pitiful it was. The poor pitiful fool. He couldn't take the hint that he lost. Shino barely did anything to him. How many hits did he actually take? 2? 3? This guy is undeniably pathetic and just plain weak, the thought making her chuckle and smirk before looking at the rest of Zaka's team. If that guy is that easy to defeat, then the rest of them should be easy. She thought. They Shino and the third proctor approached Zaku, who had yet to pick himself off the floor. Sprawled flat on his back, Zaku cried out though nothing touched him. The pain lingering from his fall, arms, and the punch Shino delivered to his face. Gaara could see blood dribble from his mouth. The third proctor didn't look impressed with Zaku as he assessed the damage. Holes appearing in the abused flesh of the genin's elbow. Standing up from his crouch he had used for his inspection, he gave his final verdict on the match. "I'd say this one has had it." Pausing as if he felt sorry for the poor guy. "The winner is Shino Aburame." Hayate concluded. Kurunai had a serious look on face as she took in this information. Kiba smirked, proud of his teammate for making it to the final round of the exam. Beside him, Hinata released a sigh of relief, a smile formed on her face. The sound ninja girl gritting her teeth in anger as the mummy ninja sweated and even with the bandages on, looked furious. Sakura looked freaked out. With Team Guy, Niji stood up straight as he moved away from the rail. Looking dissatisfied with the match. Before he could do anything, Rock Lee stopped him. "Wait. How did he do that? Who is he? Find out." Niji said nothing as he did as he was asked. Stepping away from the others to get a clear view, he used his Kekkei Genkai. Byakugin. He thought as his hands formed the appropriate hand signs and lines formed around his eyes. Taking a closer look at Shino, Niji gasped at what he observed. "I had no idea. I thought he must be using a summoning jutsu to get all those insects, but no." Niji informed his teammate, shock lacing his tone. "They're actually living inside of him. Living inside of him." Rock Lee nearly shouted in shock as he turned to Niji, wondering if his rival was pulling his leg. Freaking out at the thought of bugs living inside the younger boy. "There's a legend in the Leaf Village of a clan of insect tamers." Tenten mentioned. "Yes, I've heard of that clan as well." Niji shared as he informed Lee of what he knew about the clan. "They say when a bug master is born, he enters into a scared pact with the insects. He allows them to nest in his body. In return, they obey their host's will. They serve him, answering his call, fighting his battles and destroying his enemies. I've also heard that they allow the insects to feed on their chakra as part of the bargain." Down below, Shino continued on his way as Niji watched the powerful opponent he could face if and when he made it to the final round of the exam. Rock Lee was shaking as he too turned to look down at Shino. "So this guy is one of them? One of these bug tamers?" As Shino moved to go join his team on the balcony, Medic Ninja moved in to collect Zaku and transport him to the tower's infirmary. The screen started showing the next fight and everyone gasped at the names, even Naruto looked mortified at the names. Naruto Uzumaki vs Karen Uzumaki. Chapter 66, Uzumaki vs Uzumaki. Naruto Uzumaki vs Karen Uzumaki. As Naruto stared at the screen, reading and rereading the names, it dawned on him that he was about to fight Karen. He had wanted to speak with her, and he had sensed the chakra emanating from her, much like he had sensed it emanating from Kimimaro when he used to wield the cursed seal of Orochimaru. He knew she must be in pain and that the snake Sannin had most likely forced her to serve him. Naruto wondered if he could do anything to help her. He didn't know how to remove a cursed seal. He had never attempted to remove one before. The redhead couldn't help but cast a glance over his shoulder to the other side of the hall, where, in contrast to him, Karen stood firm and didn't appear to be bothered by the names on the screen. While walking down the stairs to the arena, Naruto heard Ashera and Fu wish him luck. However, the rest of his team said nothing. His sensei appeared to be more focused at this point. When he arrived at the arena, Karen stood in front of him, her eyes narrowed, a sword tightened around her hip. The sword was a katana, and she was a fierce opponent. As the chakra flowed through the sword like a violent river, Naruto was almost convinced that the sword was alive in some way. He was perplexed as to what the deal was with the sword. After slowly moving his hand to the pommel of his katana and infusing wind chakra into it, Naruto's sword's blade turned slightly red, almost shining. "Being a Kenjutsu practitioner, I'm really looking forward to this," Naruto said, hoping to elicit some sort of response from Karen, but she stood as emotionless as a stone, the only change in her outward expression being a flash of sadness across her eyes that vanished as quickly as it appeared. Neither Naruto nor Karen said anything when Hayate asked them if they were ready to begin. When Hayate asked them, both nodded without saying anything. Despite Hayate's announcement that they could begin, none of the Uzumakis moved a finger. "Beat her ass, Naruto," Sakura yelled, raising her fist in the air and leaning against the railing. Sasuke could sense the tension building, and so could the rest of the audience. Niji fixed his gaze on the Senju, waiting to see how much of a threat he was to the group. Lee questioned whether Naruto would be able to emerge victorious from this battle. He had heard that Naruto had stood his ground so that his friends could flee, which was about as youthful as one could get. Tenten couldn't keep her gaze away from their weapons. She could recognize the steel from a mile away. Both of their katanas were made of special steel, which was probably the best steel in the world. Tenten sighed. She was curious as to where they obtained them because, as far as she was aware, no one knew where to find that particular type of steel anymore. One of her father's stories was that the legendary sword of the Uzumaki clan, Dark Blood, was the catalyst for the great division of Kiri. She remembered her father telling her about this. The Jinchuriki of Matatabi wondered how this would go. True, she knew Naruto wasn't to be underestimated, but this would be the first time she'd get to see him in action. Yujito remained silent, wondering how good Naruto really was. B-sensei, who was standing behind her, was deafeningly quiet, his gaze fixed on the sword that the Uzumaki girl was wielding. I'm familiar with that blade, but I thought it had vanished after the massacre of the Uzumaki clan, Gyuki said, speaking on his head. The sword known as Akai Hano was wielded by an Uzumaki warrior named Meo Uzumaki 7 centuries ago, who stood his ground against Hachibi Gyuki and survived the battle with only his right arm severed from the shoulder down. Gyuki wondered aloud, recalling the damned Uzumaki unleashing his most powerful attack, which caused an entire mountain to be sliced in half like paper. I wonder if the girl can reach that level, Gyuki speculated. Jitego remained silent, contemplating what it would be like to fight him, and he appreciated the opportunity to witness a genin who had stood his ground against a sannin and survived. Alright, Uzumaki, how about we get this fight started? In the end, Naruto finally asked the question after a few more minutes of staring into each other's eyes. When the redhead girl responded, she nodded before drawing her katana and putting herself in the sword position. Naruto drew his katana back and spun around to attack Karen's unprotected left side with it after coming into contact with her katana. Finally, Karen narrowly escaped Naruto's horizontal slash by spinning around to Naruto's left and attempting the same move on Naruto's unguarded side on the other side. As soon as Naruto caught a glimpse of what Karen was doing out of the corner of his eye, he sprang to his right side as quickly as he could to protect himself. A minor cut to his arm was all that was left after the slashing, but it was enough to keep him from being killed and to put some distance between them. Following his successful avoidance of Karen's slash, Naruto reversed direction to face the redhead girl before moving forward to engage her once more. 2 minutes later, both redhead shinobi were engaged in a fierce steel battle with each other. They were both moving at breakneck speed at the time. In the eyes of those who weren't as skilled as some, the two redheads appeared as blurs as they moved from one end of the field to the other, appearing for a split second to clash swords before disappearing in the same blur as they had appeared. The good shinobi side were able to keep up with and follow their movements and were awestruck by the speed and agility of both genin. As the battle progressed, Naruto retreated in order to avoid being struck by another downward sword slash from Karen, who was advancing on him. In his next move, he attempted to catch the Uzumaki kunoichi off guard by utilizing the rolling water technique, which he had discovered on his own. The moment Naruto made a light stab at Karen, Karen leapt backwards at the last possible second in order to avoid the more serious blow. Karen moved forward as soon as she managed to avoid Naruto's attack in order to take advantage of an opening that had appeared as a result of Naruto's error. In order to avoid the slash and maintain some distance between them while swinging her katana down on Naruto, Uzumaki swung her katana down on him after jumping backwards to avoid the slash. He attempted to surprise the girl by passing his katana from his left hand to his right hand, which he concealed behind his back, in an attempt to use the Nagarera Mizu, following water, technique. He was unsuccessful. On the other hand, Karen raised her katana at the exact moment Naruto swung his sword, deflecting the slash and pushing Naruto back. Karen couldn't defend herself because the assailant vanished in an instant. Afterwards, Naruto reappeared in front of the female Uzumaki and attempted to cut her from behind, only to be cut through the air by Karen, who vanished in the same way as before. These moments were filled with frantic sprinting around the arena, dodging each other's attacks while slashing at each other at the same time, as the two redheads battled for supremacy. To behold such a sight was a thrilling experience. The fight progressed and a few members of the audience noticed sparks erupting from the two katana as they collided, which they later confirmed. Following another Naruto slash, Karen drew several shuriken from a seal on her wrist and hurled them at Naruto, causing him to fall to the ground. As soon as he was forced to deflect them with his katana, Karen took advantage of the situation by sprinting up to him and using the mirror slash technique on him. After realizing what Karen was planning, Naruto leapt into the air to avoid being struck by the lethal slash that would have ended his life. On the other hand, Naruto had no idea that this was exactly what Karen had in mind, and he had no way of knowing that he was now vulnerable to attack while flying through the air. She cut the Uzumaki in the face with the mirror blade, before preparing to cut off his head with the mirror blade. The redhead boy's head was about to be cut off when Naruto transformed into a large wooden log and revealed that he had used Kawarimi no Jutsu to replace himself with a large wooden log just as she was about to cut it off, body replacement technique. So as soon as she realized that Naruto had played a trick on her, she immediately began searching the arena for any evidence of the Uzumaki's presence. Her attention was drawn to Naruto's sword by the reflection in the corner of her left eye, and she quickly spun around to avoid being struck by the lethal sword a short time later. As a result of a barrage of rapid attacks from him, Karen was forced to go on the defensive. At the exact moment Karen realized she was at a disadvantage, she made the decision to turn the tables on her opponent by channeling chakra into the kunais on her right hand. Naruto was then attacked by her, with her kunai blades attempting to slash at his left side and her katana blocking one of Naruto's blows. Naruto was forced to flee the battlefield. As soon as Naruto became aware of this, his reaction was quick and he leapt away, narrowly avoiding being slashed on the edge of his jacket a second time after that. When Karen challenged Naruto, he quickly retrieved a kunai from his utility belt to help him level the playing field with the other character. After that, they battled it out for the next 10 minutes, moving around the arena and trying to gain an advantage over the other in their pursuit of victory. Because of his katana and kunai, Naruto was able to hold his own in the fight for a short period of time. Naruto's kunai was thrown at the redhead's head after deflecting one of Karen's sword stabs with his katana, and the redhead was temporarily distracted. Natsu's kunai was aimed at her, but she was able to avoid being struck in the head. As a result of this, Naruto was able to take the initiative and go on the offensive against his opponents. As a result, Karen reacted by swinging her kunai at Naruto's head, putting him on the defensive in an attempt to put him on the defensive. After noticing this, Naruto dove beneath the swipe and used his sword to cut Karen's legs out from under her. After performing a backwards flip to avoid being struck by Naruto's sword swipe, Karen kicked the redhead beneath the chin, causing him to fall backwards. They both recovered quickly and charged at breakneck speed towards each other, engaging in a bloody brawl that lasted for several minutes. They were both seriously injured. While they were fighting, Karen was able to use her bare hands to knock Naruto's katana out of his grasp and into the air. The result was that Naruto was able to punch her in the stomach with such force that she skidded several feet back across the ground and collapsed in agony. Soon after arriving, Naruto charged his right fist with chakra and delivered the deciding blow to Karen. The redhead kunoichi was about to be struck by Naruto when Karen leapt into the air and executed a flawless mid-air flip over him, avoiding the punch while simultaneously kicking the Uzumaki in the back of the head, causing him to fall to the ground. However, Naruto made the distinction by drawing his hands up to his chest as he fell forward, enabling him to land on his feet. Karen had only recently returned to the ground after landing on her feet when he turned around and threw several shuriken from his seal around his belt at her, forcing her to move away. The moment Naruto received her back in his arms, he raced over to his katana and picked it up, before re-engaging Karen with his katana for the second time. While they clashed swords with each other for several more minutes, neither of the two redhead sword users gained a significant advantage over their opponent's sword skills. The two redheads separated themselves and leapt away from one another as their final sword clash came to a close, allowing them to assess the damage and decide what to do next. After a brief pause, the two genin took off at breakneck speed in the direction of one another. In the aftermath of a brief clash of blades, the two genin reappeared at opposite ends of the arena, facing in opposite directions. After reappearing, they immediately turned around to face each other, and Naruto threw his kunai at Karen. She launched a kunai from her pouch, striking Naruto's projectile square in the face and deflecting it away from its intended target. While the kunoichi was distracted by Naruto, he attempted a downward slash, which she narrowly missed blocking. For the next few minutes, the two young shinobi raced around the arena at breakneck speed, fighting furiously in the hopes of gaining the upper hand. The audience stood and watched as they raced around the arena at breakneck speed, their breath caught in their throats. After a while in the match, Naruto was able to gain the upper hand by blocking one of Karen's sword strikes and pushing her to the opposite end of the arena, where she was forced to drop her katana. Naruto then proceeded to defeat Karen by defeating her with a katana of his own. Karen yelled fire style, Ash Maker, before pursuing his advantage with a series of high-speed hand seals, causing a massive stream of green hot flames to erupt from her mouth. Crap! When Naruto became aware of the large fire stream coming towards him, he used several signs as quickly as he could to avoid being hit. Naruto was engulfed by a massive wall of water after a series of multiple drops of water appeared all around him during water style, Point Break. Everybody in the arena covered their eyes as the green fire and his water jutsu collided. The heat emanating from the green fire caused everyone in the arena to cover their eyes. Astonishment filled Yujito's eyes as she realized the extent of the heat emanating from the green flames, which she had never seen or heard of before. "Can you tell me what kind of flame that was, Nibi?" Yujito muttered something to her friend. "I'm not sure what to make of it, but keep an eye out for that kitten," Nibi cautioned, having never heard of anyone being able to use green flames before. "Naruto-kun," Fu screamed out in panic, and she was about to jump down to the ground when Ashera grabbed her shoulder and stopped her in her tracks. "Don't be concerned, Naruto is still alive," she said, a worried expression on her face as she looked down at the arena. When Karen lost sight of Naruto in the steam cloud, she paused her attack and waited for the steam to dissipate before continuing her attack. Eventually, a large crescent-shaped blade of wind erupted from the steam and flew towards her as the steam began to die down. When Karen managed to avoid the deadly wind attack, the attack slashed the arena wall behind her, leaving a large slash mark on the surface of the arena wall behind her. As soon as she managed to evade the initial attack, several kunai attacked her from behind, forcing her to flee once more. She jumped back to avoid them despite the fact that she didn't have much time on her hands. However, she soon discovered that they were tied to exploding notes, which exploded shortly after they hit the ground. Despite the fact that half of the arena was still covered in steam, Karen began searching for Naruto as soon as the explosion occurred, narrowly avoiding injury and suffering only minor injuries in the process. As the steam continued to dissipate, Naruto emerged from the cloud, his katana in hand, attempting to stab her in the stomach with it. The wait was brief. The moment Karen realized what was going on, he deftly sidestepped the redhead boy's attack and then struck him in the back of the head with a reverse heel kick in the hopes of knocking him out cold. He, however, as soon as Naruto arrived on the ground, burst into a cloud of smoke and revealed himself to be an impersonator of Kage Bunshin, Shadow Clone. The moment the redhead girl realized what had happened, she immediately turned her attention back to the steam cloud, which had completely dissipated by that point, and was able to see the real Naruto within it. He was unable to focus on the task at hand because he was distracted by the need to complete a lengthy series of hand seals to gather all of the remaining water in the arena. When Karen noticed Naruto performing a long series of hand seals in one place and a large amount of water being gathered in another, she realized he was preparing a large-scale water technique. After learning about Naruto's attack method, Karen devised her own series of hand seals to counteract it. Approximately at the same time, both genin completed their set of hand seals, and they launched their individual attacks at approximately the same time as well. Water Style, Water Dragon Bullet Technique. Naruto let out a yell. After she finished her hand seals, Karen reflected on them and thought to herself, Fire Style, Wildfire. After that, she spat out a long stream of green fire, this time in the shape of a bird. Within seconds, the two powerful attacks collided, resulting in a massive explosion that instantly neutralized both of them at the point of contact, effectively ending the battle. Naruto had completely prepared his secret Fuinshitsu to neutralize Karen and bring the battle to a close before any of them were seriously injured, lost a limb, or even died. No one in the arena or outside the arena was aware of Naruto's preparation. Naruto could feel the chakra around her shoulder becoming more intense. Naruto wasn't sure how much control Karen had over her cursed mark, but he didn't want to find out either way. Karen was exhaling heavily, the curse mark on her shoulder was burning, and she had the sensation that something was trying to come out of her skin, slowly piercing and cutting its way to the surface. She clenched her teeth in pain, her palm resting on the mark she had made. "No, Orochimaru-sama, I am capable of completing this task on my own," she thought determined, recalling her master's directives in her mind. Her personal feelings aside, she needed to serve him because he had saved her when no one else could, and she kept telling herself over and over that he had saved her. She prepared to attack when Naruto spoke for the first time during the duel, when her red eyes opened and she saw him standing with his katana in his right palm. "This is it," he said before slamming his hands together, and she gasped. A large weight was suddenly placed on her entire body, and she gasped. Several seals around the arena were glowing purple and joined together to form a giant seal on the floor, with Karen standing in the middle of it. Her whole body ached as she felt herself slipping away from her feet and she collapsed on the ground, unable to stand. Naruto's demonstration of Fuinshitsu mastery drew gasps from the audience. Karen had the sensation that she was about to pass out and couldn't keep her eyes open any longer. "Naruto is so amazing!" Ino yelled loudly and enthusiastically, raising her arms in the air and cheering enthusiastically. "Yes!" Sakura exclaimed, pumping his fist into the air in excitement. "Naruto did a fantastic job," Jiraiya thought to himself as he smiled. He was extremely pleased with his pupil. "Nice! A large smile appeared on Ashara's face as she exclaimed. Naruto has come a long way in a short period of time, Kakashi observed. It appeared that Naruto had completed the task, as he had defeated the red chick, exclaimed an overjoyed Omoi, who had been quite impressed by their level of kenjutsu proficiency. Wakyo, Killer Bee thought to himself after watching the fight. The Uzumaki must be put down. The Suna team sensei was aware that someone with that level of skill in Fuinjutsu is extremely dangerous. Bravo Naruto-kun! Exclaimed Fu, who was jumping up and down and clapping his hands. Geez, what a troublesome fight, Shikamaru grumbled as he looked around the arena at the marks left by the fighters, grateful that he had assumed he could just forfeit because this was becoming too troublesome. As Kankuro grew increasingly alarmed over Uzumaki's actions, he quietly inquired, "This is not good, Temari. Someone like him might be able to do something against Gaara." "I understand." Temari, who was also concerned, stepped in to say something. Despite his Fuinjutsu prowess, he is powerless to stop Gaara from transforming. With his expression indicating that he was not entirely convinced, implying that both he and his sister were doubting their own words. Instead of engaging in conversation with the others, Sasuke, Gaara, and Shino simply stared down the arena, their gaze fixed on Naruto. When Heiei got closer to announcing the winner of the match, after hearing Karen scream out in agony and feeling her entire being burning, Naruto looked shocked and concerned, not understanding why she was in such pain until he noticed marks spreading out around her face and chest, which looked like dark chains spreading everywhere. "Karen, accept my power," Orochimaru-sama said in her head as her entire body was covered in dark chains, almost like a tattoo. Her skin was on fire, and the pain was unlike anything she'd ever experienced. Naruto watched as the new strength slowly destroyed his seal, and Karen rose up on her legs, her red hair having darkened and grown to reach her middle back. She lifted her head, and her right eye, which had lost its red color, had turned yellow. "Let's give it another shot," Karen said, her katana engulfed in purple chakra as she spoke. Chapter 67, The Red Sword. She felt her chakra spike, her whole body burning, she felt dead, all she could feel was the pain, a pain that never left her. Despite everything, she was always someone else's property. Her chakra turned from blue to black like night, scaring almost every genin around her. "Why can't I feel him?" Karen asked herself. She always could feel everyone's chakra, but she couldn't feel Naruto's chakra. As she felt more pain, her eyes welling in tears, "Why did you have to leave us, Two-san? Everything would be alright right now. We would be home together." "Karen," she heard her mother's voice calling out to her. It sounded a bit different from usual but ran to her as always. "Yes, mother." A red-haired 5-year-old made her way to her mother. She saw that the front door was opened and that they had a visitor. A visitor from the village they were staying at. "What do they want now?" she thought sadly. "Can't they wait for my father's return?" Her mother turned now to face her with tears in her dark red eyes. "Karen." The small girl ran to her mother and embraced her tightly. "Mom, why are you crying?" The woman held her daughter tighter. "Karen, you're..." She pulled back and faced her daughter. "Your father's back. Dad is back?" She shook her head in confusion. "But I didn't sense his chakra this morning. I would have welcomed him at the gate." "He's outside," the village spoke. She looked up to the dirty man and didn't like his tone. He sounded annoyed and bored to even be here at their small house. "Outside?" Her mother refused to let go of her and this scared Karen. "Mom, I want to see Dad. Is he okay?" She felt tears start to form in her eyes. Why do I feel sad? Why do I sense something bad?" "Karen," her mother held her once more and she felt her shake. "Mother!" Karen finally screamed. "Let go of me, I want to see my father." With all her strength she escaped her hold and ran past the villager who stood at their door. Her mother now was on the floor crying and whispering her father's name. Karen looked outside at their dry front yard and saw 2 other villagers next to a cart. They looked at her and proceeded to bring out a body which was covered in a white blanket. They dropped the body on the floor and left. Karen stood in shock as the body's hand had not been covered and she saw that on the index finger was a ring. A ring similar to her mother's. A ring that was promised to be hers one day when she would be older. A ring that her father had promised to give her at her wedding day when she would become older. And no. She ran to the body, afraid to uncover the face, but she had to. She had to know. With her small hand she uncovered the face that was covered in a not-so-clean cover. She saw bright red hair such as she owned. She saw the lips had been darted with dry blood. The body's eyes were closed. "Daddy, Daddy." She shook her father's cold body. Daddy, come on, wake up, I'll help you clean up, you're a brave solider, huh? I want to be as strong as you one day. She placed her hand on his forehead. Daddy, let me see your eyes. I want to see your eyes, Daddy. Her mother made it to her side and she held Karen. Karen, Mom, tell Dad to wake up, she pleaded, still looking at her father. Tell him to wake up, he has to clean up and tomorrow he'll take me to school, right? Karen, her mother pressed her face on her back. My love, Dad, come on, you're making Mom cry. Karen, please, your dad, The red-haired girl didn't want to hear it. No. 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 She finally gave up and threw herself onto her father's dead body. Dad. No. No. Oh. No. No. She didn't know how long she cried that day or how numb she felt as she helped bury her father in front of their house with her mother. She didn't know that day would only be the first day of her losing everything in her life. She didn't know that in 2 years she would also have to bury her mother's body next to her father's. She didn't know that her own body would also be used just as her parents' bodies were used, in a war that wasn't for her to fight in. As a young child, father and mother were taken away from her. Her body was also taken away from her. She was 8 when she met him. The snake man, she had called him, and he just laughed. My, what lovely red hair you have. He reached out to her, but she quickly moved away from his touch. Karen, you have your father's hair, so nice and soft. Don't touch my hair. She spat out, glaring at the man that had saved her from 2 grown men. Oh, and matching fiery eyes. He laughed. Interesting. Your eyes are as bright as your mother. What a beautiful daughter I have been blessed with. Stop looking at me, you freak. Karen started to back away as she sensed that the man's chakra was so dark and cold. Just leave me alone, I know you've been following me. These men attacking me was part of your plan, right? TSK, the man shook his head in disapproval. How can you say that, little girl? I just saw you were in the need of help. Bullshit. I can feel your chakra and it's disgusting. Feel my chakra? His yellow eyes lit up in amazement. Honey, do you know what Karen did today? What happened? Is she okay? She's more than okay, she's amazing. She sensed you from 5 miles away. But she's only 4. I know. Isn't that amazing? And such an early age she would make the Uzma dash. Dear, no one else must know. Karen, you have a great gift. So, leave me alone. Karen started to walk away, but he moved in such a high speed she almost collided into him. And where will you go? He questioned. Will you go back to the village full of people who abuse your powers? How? She stared at him. Come with me, Karen, he offered her his hand. If you leave with me, I will help you to grow your power and make it your own. My own? Karen, one day your powers will be used by others, but don't you ever forget that these powers are yours. Yes, my dear, your own power, and you may use it however you wish to. She looked at him through her glasses and nodded. Fine, take me away from this place. She was taken away by a man that had promised her power, yet he used her as well. He experimented on her. He used her. Her body was still not her own. Her powers were not hers to use. She really didn't have a childhood. She had a tragic past. She suffered. She was alone. Naruto. Many genins in his immediate vicinity were terrified by the image in front of them. Even the jonins were taken aback by what they were witnessing. Her chakra had darkened and become much more powerful. Sasuke was taken aback, wondering what kind of power this was. His curiosity was piqued, and he didn't want to admit that it was something he had never experienced before. He wasn't a sensor, but even he could sense the malice in the air around him. The pressure had caused cracks in the concrete, which had begun to crack. Uzumaki Naruto, on the other hand, was enraged because Orochimaru had caused this to a member of the Uzumaki clan, who had suffered for how many years before this snake did this to them. Karen, you have to stop doing this. Shut up, he saved me. I'm obligated to complete this task, Karen screamed as more chakra engulfed her entire body, causing her to lose more control. While her skin had turned white, her chakra had darkened and her red hair had turned a dark purple. Grasping his sword with greater strength than before, Naruto's chakra flew around it, creating a wave of heat that spread throughout the arena. Everyone was taken aback by the heat, and Kakashi looked at Naruto's sword with interest. He didn't understand why the edge of the sword had turned bright red, almost like blood, but he couldn't help but notice the pressure around them. Despite the fact that Naruto's hands were on fire and the heat of the pommel was unbearable to anyone else, Naruto was able to maintain control of the sword despite the extreme heat. Karen's yellow pupil narrowed slightly as she took in what she was seeing in front of her. It appeared as though Naruto's hand had been enveloped in the red chakra of the Kyuubi, and the sword he was holding had been transformed as well. Its edge had turned red, and the pommel had become warm in a way. Can you tell me what's going on? After noticing the pressure all around them, Sakura inquired aloud. It felt underwhelming, as if heavy weights were suddenly placed on their shoulders, forcing them to the ground. Hiruzen could only watch in awe. The last people he had seen using the red sword were Kushina and Mito Uzumaki, and the red sword was a special type that caused the sword itself to harm the user if they couldn't handle it. If a normal person attempted to hold the sword when it had turned into a red sword, their skin would burn beyond recognition, and they would die as well. He used to wonder if the red sword was something that could only be used by Uzumakis because he had never heard of anyone else being able to perform that kenjutsu move. Yugao looked on in awe. She had read about the kenjutsu move and had even attempted to replicate it, but had failed miserably in her attempts. She was looking at it with her own eyes and was amazed. Many people became dizzy as a result of the heat generated by Naruto's sword, with some even losing consciousness. Sakura fell to her knees, but Kakashi helped her to her feet before she fell completely unconscious, as did Ino, Choji, Kiba, Hinata, and many others. Despite the fact that Naruto was holding the sword, he could feel the pain. It was slight, but he could still feel it. Kurama, what exactly is this? He asked himself this question mentally, not understanding what was going on, but he could feel his hand burning, which was happening at a slow pace. Congratulations Naruto, you just unlocked your red sword, but this is not the time for celebration. End this fight. The first time of using this technique can cause serious damage, Kurama warned, knowing such a technique was created by Roku Uzumaki himself. What exactly do you mean? I'd never heard of it before, so how am I supposed to use it if I didn't even know it existed? Naruto asked himself, his hand burning hot from the heat of the pommel. Later Naruto, now finish this duel, Kurama said, knowing that this kenjutsu move wasn't an S-rank move for nothing. After mentally nodding, Naruto took his position. Karen's last purple eye turned yellow, and the sword in her hand began to change as well, the edge becoming blackened and a dark chakra encircling it. Tsunade stood there terrified, remembering how Grandma Mito had once cut down an entire forest with a single swing of her red sword, a technique she had named single swing at the time, which meant that the duel would be over in one swing, one attack, and that was it. If you survive this, Karen, then I would be happy to offer you some ramen. Naruto spoke. Karen felt something on her chest by his words but immediately pushed them away, preparing her stance ready to cut Naruto in two. Because he knew this technique was out of the ordinary, Kakashi pushed both Sasuke and Sakura behind him. The red sword was being watched with dread and interest by Ashera, who had never heard of it before, but she could feel the amount of chakra that had accumulated at the sword. Naruto's chakra had caused the sword to turn red, and Karen's chakra now was as dark as night, causing her sword to turn black. Naruto and Karen both moved at the same time. They're sprinting towards each other, ready to put an end to it with a single move. Single swing. Dark mirror. Before anyone realized what was happening, time seemed to have stopped for a split second. Both Naruto and Karen stood where the other had stood only a split second before, their swords still engulfed in chakra. Everyone waited with bated breath because no one could see a single difference between them. They appeared to be the same as before, with no wounds or anything. In particular, Jiraiya, who wanted to see what had happened, was feeling the dread take over them. Tsunade was feeling the same way. Neither Jitego nor anyone on the Kyumo team could tell who had won. Aniko, on the other hand, was completely unaware. He had no idea who had won but was incredibly excited to see who would be cut open. Hiruzen looked down at the results with a sour expression on his face, knowing who had won and feeling a pang of pity for the loser. Orochimaru, you monster! When Karen suddenly fell to her knees, her sword fell from her hand and stabbed into the concrete. The sword then returned to its normal state, and a slash of blood flowed across her chest like a waterfall. The red sword fully mastered SSS rank. Used by 9 Uzumaki so far. Cost: hand of the user if not trained properly to losing life. Damage: can cut everything, even mountains, islands, Susanoo, and Bijou. That's it for part 11. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.